Welcome to Ingrid's World. On this show, meet two women who are making a difference regarding good health and education for our children. Dr. Anastasia Williams is founder of Old Town Pediatrics with offices in Manassas and Gainesville, Virginia. A native New Yorker, she is a graduate of Cornell University, where she earned a degree in chemistry. She completed her medical training as a generalist scholar at the University of Virginia School of Medicine and her pediatric residency at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. Dr. Williams is board-certified pediatrician and is a member of the American Academy of Pediatrics. She is the attending physician at Novak Prince William Hospital, where she serves as chairman of the Pediatric Council and is on the peer review committee. As assistant professor at George Washington University, clinical instructor for George Mason University also. She has introduced many students to the art of pediatrics. She has regularly been voted a top doctor by her peers, Washingtonian magazine, as well as Northern Virginia magazine from 2005 through 2016, and has been recognized by the Guide to America's Top Pediatrician. Dr. Williams was most recently honored with a proclamation from the city of Manassas for her service to the community. Then we will meet Lillie Jessie, who was elected to the Prince William County School Board and served as vice chair for calendar year 2016. She was first elected November the 6th, 2012, and then was re-elected November 2015 to represent the Occoquan district on the Prince William School Board. Lillie is a former teacher and administrator in Prince William County Public Schools, retired after 35 years. 20 years she served as principal of Vaughan Elementary School. Lillie is an internationally recognized author, mentor, master teacher, and innovative administrator who has authored 3 anthologies, The Collaborative Principal and Collaborative Teacher, and published by Solution Tree. In her recently national published anthology, it's called The Principle of the Thing. She and her staff are featured in national videos, and she is the author of a national video called Nothing Happens Until People Are Having Fun. And she's also an educational writer for the Old Bridge Observer. Now let's welcome to the show our amazing guest and Dr. Williams. Dr. Williams, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm excited about you being here, and I always like to say, tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive into this interview.
As you mentioned, I am a native New Yorker, born and raised in the Bronx, known as the Boogie Down, I discovered when I went to college. I was born to parents who were legal Haitian immigrants who always emphasized in our home the importance of education. And one of the things they always encouraged us to do was to pursue a career either in medicine or law, like many immigrant families do.
Yes.
And they were a big part of why I went into the field of medicine. My dad is a physician. He went to medical school when I was 12 years old, and my mom, I was there when she went to college and when she finished graduate school. So education was really important in our household.
But what made you select pediatrics?
That's a great question. I love working with children. Actually, I remember when I was about 5 or 6 years old, my parents asked me, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? And at that time, I thought it would be wonderful to just work in Toys R Us. That was my goal. I wanted to be able to, like, you know, help with the store during the day, and then in the evenings when the store was closed, just play with the toys all day. When I first answered that, with that response, they kind of looked at me and it was silent and and you know, and they started to talk to me about how great it would be to, you could still work with kids, but what about being a doctor? If you were a doctor, then you could help people and make a difference. And you know, so eventually over time, when they would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'd say, a doctor, and they'd say, good girl, we're so proud of you. My daughter's going to be a doctor.
Love it.
Certainly there were times during late adolescence and early adulthood that I rethought that. There are many different ways to help people. You help people every day on your show. But the more I investigated, I felt like the optimal way to really bring together my passion for science. I used to teach as well, and working with children was to actually be a pediatrician. Kids get better. Most kids get better no matter what you do. And kids are happy. I love to laugh. I love to just have fun at work. And that's a great population to work with in medicine.
So, speaking of children, what is the state of youth and health? Where are we right now in terms of our young people?
There are many challenges facing young people today, from internet security to bullying, cyberbullying. But I would definitely say by far the most pressing issue affecting children today is childhood obesity. In fact, in a very recent study that was done by the CDC, they also pointed out that that's a big concern for many parents and adults in our community.
Yes, it is.
Childhood obesity has more than tripled in the last 40 years. And with childhood obesity comes many different comorbidities or diseases that can really affect the longevity and the life expectancy for our children over time.
Wow! Oh my goodness! But so how do you prevent something obesity epidemic?
You know, that's a great question. Certainly, with the trends that we're seeing, it's been a bigger problem in our country. And the prevention, part of the prevention is really understanding how we got there in the first place. You know, some of what's happened to us and our children in this country is a result of our affluence, right? We're exposed to options, you know. And the mathematics is pretty simple, you know. We're eating or consuming more calories, and we're burning fewer calories, you know. So as far as eating more calories, a lot of our families have been eating a lot more fast foods, and they're supersizing their foods. We're choosing foods that have higher content of fat and sugar, sugary drinks. And we're not eating as many fresh fruits and vegetables. And also, with the advent of the internet and video games, there's so much that we all enjoy just sitting in our seats at our desks or laying in our beds, from watching television to playing video games and being on our cell phones and texting and twittering, and my daughter would laugh if she heard me say that. But we've become more sedentary as a nation.
Okay. So what do we do to prevent it? What can we do? I'm sitting at home, I'm dealing with that. I mean, I definitely deal with that. What can I do?
For starters, we can change what we eat and how we eat. During her tenure in the White House, First Lady Michelle Obama launched a battle against childhood obesity called Let's Move. But as a part of that movement, she actually worked with the USDA to kind of revamp a little bit of the food icons that we use to explain nutrition, you know, via the federal government. So as you can see on this slide, in the past, we talked about the my pyramid approach to the foods that we should eat. But now we talk more about my plate. And one of the things you'll notice at first glance is that, you know, you have the same number of food groups, but the plate is a smaller plate. Yes, which means smaller portions. And you have on half of that plate all fruits and vegetables. Half the plate is all fruits and vegetables. And on the other half, you have your protein, and you have your grain, your whole grains. And then in the little round circle is the dairy. So that's one place we can start, is by changing what we eat and how we eat, you know.
Okay. Wow, that sounds really good. And that's something that, because I always know it's particularly, what does the busy parent do? I mean, you know, I would love to fix something, you know, nutritious, but I have soccer practice, I just got off late from work, you know, I'm exhausted coming back from work, matter of fact, you know.
And that's where the biggest challenge is, isn't it? You know, as I'm a working mom, and certainly when you're exhausted after long days of work, you don't really have time to go home and cook a nutritious meal. You know, it's so tempting to go out and just grab a McDonald's Happy Meal, or, you know. But I still think that we are already starting to see that as a country, because this issue is so important to many of us, there are healthier options for us out there now. You know, some of it's going to take some forethought and planning, you know. So you need to come up with a way to have those fresh fruits and vegetables be easily accessible to us and our children for snacks for when we're hungry. And maybe, you know, cooking a fresh meal, you know, organic preferably if you can, and unprocessed, and then freezing it and then taking it out and just heating it up pretty quickly. Things that'll make it faster for us without having to purchase and consume high calorie, low nutritious value foods.
Right. Oh my goodness. So the food that you discussed needs to be on the plate. And so if a viewer is out there looking at it and said, okay, I love what Dr. Williams is saying, I want to kind of like integrate this into my life, what's step one?
I would say step one is acknowledging where you are. Accepting what your situation is. And step two would be to actually take a commitment and take at least one step to make that change. So let me give you an example. You know, in our family, sometimes it was challenging to make sure that we were all getting the vegetables that we needed. So, you know, rather than thinking about the vegetables at the end, you know, we made a decision that our meals were going to be more than, because we love meat and potatoes, exactly. We love meat and potatoes. But it's to make sure that we have plenty of vegetable options and salads in the house that are easily accessible, and to make that half of our plate. That's half your meal right there. The meat, for many households, at least it was for ours, the meat was the most important part of the meal, right?
And in my household too, it's not a meal unless they see the meat.
Exactly, and the meat's important, the protein's important. But I'd say even more important, especially today, are the vegetables over the fruit, and whole grain rather than processed refined grain.
Wow. So we start there, we eat healthy. Do you have suggestions of when we should kind of like stop eating, like before bedtime, or?
Well, that's a great question. You definitely want to eat until you're almost full and stop, you know. And part of that is starting with those small portions that we talked about, right? If you start with a small portion, particularly children, you know, when I grew up, my grandmother used to say, you better finish all that food on your plate. That's how we raised our kids. And the plate would be full from the start. Well, start with the small portions. I tell the kids to eat those vegetables first, and then add those other foods. And you don't want to eat till you're over full. You know, you eat until you're comfortable and you're not hungry anymore, and a little bit more, and then stop.
Great advice. Great advice that I hope our viewers will take into consideration. I know I am. You know, don't fill up the plate. And I'll tell everybody in my household, it's not going to be all meat. Well, Dr. Williams, you're absolutely wonderful. Thank you for taking the time to being on the show. I know many people are going to be watching this and getting educated too. Great to have you.
Thank you so much.
This was a very important show and great information, and I hope you were taking notes. Coming up next, we'll be talking with Lillie Jessie. So stay right there. We'll be right back. Well, welcome to the show, Lillie, Jessie.
Thank you. Thank you. Really glad to be here.
A pleasure to have you. You know, I tell you, I was so excited that you were able to be on the show. So I always say to my guests, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born in Newberry, South Carolina. Grew up really during, I grew up in the segregated South, really, and grew up in a home where we had little access to schools. In fact, I attended a segregated school. I grew up doing Brown versus the Board of Education. Oh, wow. And there was a school across the street like Linda Brown and Brown versus the Board of Education. I lived across the street from a school, was not able to attend. I walked to school every single day. It was separate but very, very unequal in the sense that we had schools that during the day, our school ended at 2 o'clock because there were no lunchrooms in that school. And so for the older students, we stayed until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we had very little access to library materials and books. And so I am the only one in my family, really, the first generation to actually go to college. And that experience has influenced everything that I do.
My goodness.
Yeah.
So is that why you select education as your career?
You know, I don't know if that was the reason I selected education as my career. During that period of time, that was the career for African Americans, women especially. It was either you were going to be a teacher or you were going to be a nurse. Okay. And so being a teacher was the goal. And for me, I went to South Carolina State University, attended South Carolina State University during the MLK marches. Wow. Participated in the MLK marches when I was there. I went to jail one time and luckily was able to go to prison the second time, because in prison, so you had your own beds. I know it sounds strange, but you had your own cell and clean linen. So I participated in all those marches, and that experience has influenced everything that I do. When we get to the part where we talk about the MLK oratorical.
Right, that's how I know you. I
know, but it was not until I was actually doing the MLK oratorical that I began to realize that my life experience had really influenced why I was doing that particular.
With such passion.
With such passion, but education was it. Being a teacher was it. And initially, I was going to be a biology teacher, but my parents were extremely poor. And I knew that when I got out of college, that I had to have a job. And so biology teachers were not as plentiful. And so I chose to go into speech pathology and audiology because it was new and upcoming. And I also wanted to work in a clinical setting. And so my first job was in Dixon, Illinois, back in the day when they did not, children who had mental problems, or at that time it was called retardation, they did not have access to public schools. So I worked in an institution and actually lived at the institution, believe it or not, because I was so naive coming out of the South. I had no idea that I would not be able to find housing in Illinois, and I ended up being the only African American on the staff at that hospital, and so I lived on the grounds. Wow. And that's where I met my husband. My husband, Richard Jessie, was in Vietnam. His sister was in that institution, had passed away, and he came home to bury her, and that's how I met him.
Oh my goodness, what a love story.
Yeah, it was a great love story. Whoa. He always says I picked her up at a mental hospital. Oh. That's how he introduced me, and I often say, well, I had the highest IQ. I mean, it was really something.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
But Lillie, what has been the key to your success?
You know, I think the key to my success has actually been my past. I was one of those kids that was found. You know, I always think that there are these bright kids waiting to be found. And this teacher named Mr. Scott, he believed that I could go to college. You know, my mother was a maid, my father was a garbage man. I had no dream of ever going to college. My dream was to be a maid, but not in South Carolina, but in New York, where I didn't have to go in the back door and all that. That was the only dream that I had. And he just kept chasing me up and down the hall saying, Lillie Mae, you're going to college. And I couldn't believe it. I thought, Mr. Scott, please, I'm not going to college. But he wrote he found me, and he wrote the scholarships for me. He just kept trying to get me in college, and I was able to get in South Carolina State College at that time. That was an all-black college at that time because of his chasing me up and down the hall, and that never left me because I'm always chasing people. I'm always looking for gifts in kids, and that's how MLK came into being. And I was always believed that there were people like me who, given the opportunity, could excel.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So, you know, you do that, and now your most recent position is that of being on the school board.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
I mean, look at the journey. Look at, oh my, it just gives me chills.
I would never envision that I would be on a school board, never. To be a principal of a school, to just be a teacher was exceptional in my home. My father couldn't even wrap his arms around the whole idea or concept of me being a supervisor or a principal, because for them it was a teacher, being a teacher. And the joke in the house was when I called him and said, Dad, you know, I was just promoted to a supervisor, and he said, you didn't lose your teaching job, did you? Because see, there was such a ceiling on our dreams and what we could believe. And so I finally said, Dad, no, I didn't lose my teaching job. So I stopped telling him I was a supervisor. And I'm sure if I said school board, he would say, what? Are you still a teacher? Because that was the goal. And so when I would go home, everybody would say, here's Lillie Mae, the teacher. And so you become that role model for... You become that role model. Yeah, you do, you do.
What inspiration. Yeah. Well, what is it like as a job of as a member of the school board? What is that like?
It's very different. Our job, of course, is to oversee everything. The superintendent's role, we oversee budget, we oversee policies, we oversee procedures. For me, it was all about student learning. I've always, because of my background and my belief that every single kid that came across my doorstep at that school would walk out of there achieving at a high level. And we were able to do that. We became a model school. We were nationally recognized for closing the gap. And the attitude in our school was, you don't get out of here without learning.
Oh, I love it.
You really,
I love it.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, you have to prove to us that you can't learn. And they knew that. And when you plant that seed, and you have to, you know, like Mr. Scott had to tell me over and over and over, that's what you have to do with kids. You have to tell them over and over and over. Like, I call it the expecting strategy. I expect. And when you do that, kids will just, they live up to that expectation.
It's limitless. You know, you can do anything with that. You shoot for the stars with that.
Yeah, all the time, every time.
So that brings me to, what do you think is confronting our children in our community the most?
It's interesting because when I saw Ferguson, for example, I did not see the chaos. I saw kids who were on the street without the academic skills or the career access to really engage in a profitable career. I think that every single child who leaves an institution should either be ready for a career credential or college. That should be the goal. Every one of them, because once you put them on the street, it's an accident waiting to happen. Because kids have to belong. There's this need, all of us have this need to belong. And so if they can't belong to a career, or they can't belong to a club that's an academic club, then the street will because they have to belong. And people who run gangs know that you need to belong. And so they just put that little apple out there, and then you take the bite. And so that's the thing, is that you really want to make sure that every single kid who leaves our school system leaves it with the ability to access the job market, either in a career situation or college.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So is that your dream for the students of Prince William County? Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I believe every single one of them should walk out of Prince William County schools with the ability, those two abilities that I talked about. You know, one road to going to college and one is to career. Now, initially, when I was a principal, I had a program called Kindergarten to College, because I felt there were kids like me who didn't grow up with parents who went to college. And so and I planted my kids' feet on college ground. So I had a relationship with Virginia Tech, and we were the first elementary school to take our kids to college. So we would leave at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5-hour trip to Virginia Tech. We would go to the STEM labs. We were there for a full day, 5th graders on college ground. Because most of the kids that I've always worked with have been either special education kids, or I've worked with kids who are lower income kids.
Right.
Or kids who come from different countries, they speak more than one language.
Right, right.
And so it was my job, I felt, that if their parents didn't go to college, that I would plant that seed of college in them very early. So we started the kindergarten to college. Now, as I've worked at the school board more, I've changed that focus a little bit, beginning to realize that the career market is very important. And so we have programs like at Potomac High School, for example, we have a welding program. And we're finding that the welding industry is an industry where the average age is 55 at this point. So those kids go down to Norfolk and to the shipyards, and they will be able to walk out of Potomac High School and be able to enter the welding career and probably have a job that's like making $40 or $50 an hour starting.
Wow.
And so now I'm beginning to change that. Every child doesn't have to go to college, but they should have access.
But you have a plan.
They should have sex to a career.
You have a plan.
Yeah,
and
they have to be somebody.
They had to be someone.
Yeah.
Well, as you know, one who lives here in Virginia, I'm just so proud of you and all the hard work that you're doing for us.
I've just had a good time. To be honest with you, you know, life has been good to me. I've just had a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful time.
Well, I had to thank you for being on this show. You were
Thank you.
Absolutely wonderful, Lillie.
Thank you.
I would like to thank Dr. Williams and Lillie Jessie for being excellent guests and discussing their careers. Both of you, I'm sure, have inspired many watching the show. My quote this time is from Rosa Parks. Each person must live their life as a model for others. Thank you for watching Ingrid's World, and don't forget to friend us on Facebook and follow Ingrid's World VA in Twitter and Instagram for instant Ingrid World news. So stay in touch and be that role model.